I finally decided on attending the... Hi, my name is Caroline. Welcome to my channel. I'm currently sitting on the ground because this feels like a good place to have a heart-to-heart conversation about what law school I picked, what factors influenced that decision, just things going through my mind as I decided what the rest of my life is going to look like. So let's get into it. First, what schools were I considering? I was accepted into 4 law schools: University of Toronto, Osgoode Law School, Michigan, and Georgetown. So out of those 4 options, I narrowed it down to U of T or Michigan. Why did I narrow those down? So the first factor I considered was ranking or prestige. This may seem like kind of like an ego thing or whatever. And ranking, in the long run doesn't really matter, but these rankings draw from a number of sources. These rankings are based on quality of education, quality of opportunities provided, employment outcomes after school. I wanted to be able to attend the best law school possible and to have the best opportunities possible. So U of T is the best law school in Canada. It does have, connections, a quality of program that's unparalleled. So I chose U of T over Osgoode in Canada. Also, I've been to U of T before. I'm familiar with U of T law. It's near where I live. It was just easy decision. In terms of the US, Michigan is ranked higher than Georgetown, and I'm very interested in international law. I'm also interested in big law, especially in New York, which Michigan would have a little bit of an edge for. And especially considering the rankings, I think Michigan is like 5-6 ranks higher than Georgetown. I picked Michigan over Georgetown. Also, my interactions with Michigan left a much deeper mark than my interactions with Georgetown. I felt like I was really belonged at Michigan, so the decision was pretty easy in choosing Michigan over Georgetown. So now we're discussing between just Michigan and U of T. So what are some factors I focused on when choosing between U of T and Michigan? First, location. This one seems pretty obvious. U of T is located in Canada and Michigan is located in the United States.
Welcome! I'm from Michigan.
Where I go to law school will basically dictate where I spend the rest of my life. Although it is possible for me to go to law school in Canada and then work in the US and vice versa, that's not something I wanted to do. If I'm going to law school in Canada, I'm staying in Canada to practice law. If I go to this law school in the US, I'm staying in the US to practice law. So this was basically a decision of whether I wanted to move my entire life to the United States. And it can be a little bit difficult because all of my friends and family are here. I don't know anyone in the US. Am I really ready to spend the rest of my life practicing law in the United States? Also, I'm from Toronto, so I'm used to growing up in a big town. I went to school at U of T, which is in Toronto. I'm a big city girl. Michigan is located in Ann Arbor, which is a small university town. It's quaint and cute and fun to be in for maybe a couple months, but I don't know how well I would survive there for 3 years. I'm a city person, so that was definitely something I considered. As well as if I went to Michigan, I'd probably end up in New York practicing afterwards. So that does kind of balance it out because I know that I will end up in a large city afterwards. So it's not like I'm spending the rest of my life in a small town. But at the same time do I even like New York? Do I want to be spending the rest of my life in New York? So this location issue isn't just location. It's also do I want to move my entire life to the United States? So that's something I thought about for a long time. And honestly, I'm still not sure what my answer is. Even though I've picked a law school, this is kind of what makes me hesitate about this is something that makes me hesitate. So at the end of the day, I decided that I was okay with moving to the US. If kind of the other factors push for a decision to moving to the United States, but it's not like I'm moving across the world. Ann Arbor is 5 hours from Toronto. So yeah, that is the first factor, location. That I consider for law school were finances. So if you don't know, U of T tuition is about 35 grand Canadian a year. Michigan law school tuition, as well as just law school in the US, is about 70 grand US dollars a year. That's twice the price of a Canadian law school. So the cost of an American law school tuition is insanely expensive. So not only is tuition more expensive, I think cost of living is pretty expensive too. You have to worry about things like buying health insurance. I would have to pay for travel costs home to visit my parents and stuff, versus in Toronto, those wouldn't be so much of an issue. So something that made this decision a little harder is I actually received a scholarship from Michigan, and it lowers the cost of attending Michigan enough to make it more comparable to a Canadian school. It is more expensive for me to attend law school in the US, but it's not as much of a difference as it was before. But in terms of paying for law school, the process is quite similar. In both, if I chose to go to law school in Canada or the US, I would probably be taking out a line of credit with the bank, which is basically like you take out a loan, and generally the interest rate that the banks charge is usually prime rate, so it's not insanely high, but that is something like I have to consider. I'll be in debt for a very long time if I go to law school in the US. Versus in Canada, I'd still be in debt, but it wouldn't be as much. So just to put it into perspective, attending law school in the US at cost would cost me about $300K US dollars for 3 years. And in comparison, in Canada, it'd be closer to 180K Canadian. This kind of leads me into my next kind of factor that I considered, and it does kind of counterbalance the finance part. So another factor I considered is earning potential after school. In the US, if I pursued big law, my first year salary after law school could be around 195K. That's obviously if I pursue big law and I actually get a big law job. But assuming I do, that's 195K I'm taking in right out of law school. In comparison, in Canada, your first year salary after graduating is around 100K. So that's almost twice the difference. So that does kind of counterbalance the fact that law school in the US is twice as expensive. I would be earning a lot more in the US than I would in Canada. And this earning potential leads me into my next factor, which is career prospects. So I've always been interested in international law as well as kind of private corporate big law. For a lot of international law opportunities, a large chunk of it can be kind of like government work, which if I stayed in Canada, that's fine because I'm a Canadian citizen. But if I go to the United States, there are a couple of job opportunities that I wouldn't qualify for because I'm not an American citizen. So some of the perks of attending kind of like a top tier American school, I miss out on because I don't qualify for those jobs. At the same time, if I go to the US, I'm basically ending up in big law, at least for the first few years, because the salary difference between big law and like public law in the US is insane. I think public law in the US makes maybe 60K coming out of law school, and that kind of amount is just not feasible for me with the debt that I would be taking on if I attended school in the US. So basically, if I go to the US, I have to do big law, and it's whether or not I want to do something like that. I considered the possibility of, switching back into international law after doing big law for a while. So there is the possibility of still doing big law and international law, or still doing international law if I attend the US. But I kind of approach the situation to be, if I go to the States, I end up in big law. And in comparison, if I stay in Canada, I can choose to do big law, or I can have, a little bit more options. I might want to do some public law or do international law. I can work for a non-for-profit or something, or an organization that pays me a little bit lower because the cost of me attending isn't as high. And this kind of influenced why I picked Michigan over Georgetown and U of T over Osgoode too, because Michigan and U of T both have better kind of employment outcomes than Georgetown and Osgoode respectively. And obviously, especially in this economy and what's going on, finding a job is very important. So these two came out ahead in that aspect. Something else that kind of I had to consider was not everyone who goes to Michigan gets a big law job. And so that's a little bit scary that if I'm taking on that much in debt, if I'm moving countries for this, that I not be able to get the job I want afterwards. And another factor is what I call vibe. This isn't the scientific term or anything, but it's just how I feel on campus. So I was fortunate enough to take a tour of Michigan before kind of the pandemic got really huge, and I was able to do a tour of U of T also before the pandemic really blew up. And this is kind of a tie for me. I really love the people that I interacted with at Michigan. The emails, just all the communication I've had with them, they've been super accommodating, super helpful. The campus is really pretty. It's very small, everything's put together. I really enjoyed kind of visiting. And same thing for U of T. I've spent 4 years here. I love U of T. I love being in Toronto. The people at U of T are also very nice. this is very close. I can envision myself vibing with both campuses. I can envision myself attending both campuses, and that's really important to me. So those are some of the more traditional factors when considering. This year it's a little bit different because we have this pandemic going on.
Coronavirus! Coronavirus!
Canada is doing a much better job of handling this pandemic than the United States is. If I go to the United States for law school, I am kind of at a higher risk of catching coronavirus than I would be in Toronto. Also, with schools kind of doing this online, in-person hybrid thing, that was something that I needed to consider too. Like, do I want to attend a law school in the US and pay that much, but have all my classes online? Would it just be easier to attend law school in Canada then? Will this pandemic impact the economy, my job prospects afterwards? This kind of pandemic makes me second guess a lot of my decisions, but I think in the long run, my reasoning was like, in a year or 2 years or even 3 years, like it'll eventually be over. Like we'll have a vaccine, right? And so I need to think kind of long term what I want. There's just all these factors that this pandemic introduces that you don't normally have to consider when you're picking a law school. And so with all of that, I finally decided on attending the University of Michigan Law this fall. I chose Michigan because I really liked the vibe. I think that the earning potential after law school was also a huge factor, but I know that if I do want to end up in international law, I think eventually the opportunities I could have in the United States would make me a more influential international lawyer than in Canada. The scholarship I received was enough to put kind of finances at a more level comparison. I enjoyed Ann Arbor when I visited, and I'm very excited at the prospect of working in New York in the future. And I'm okay with studying big law for a while, so all signs point to Michigan. I don't know if this video of me rambling about my law school decision and what factors I consider is helpful in any way, but these were just some things that I thought about when picking a law school, and I'm excited to share this journey with you all. I plan on vlogging kind of the whole move-in process, class, studying, all of that. So